I've been Buddhist since I was a teenager, luckily, influenced by a teacher who was Buddhist, and that made me look at reality in a different way. And then when I became a therapist, it made sense to bring Buddhist principles into psychotherapy, and specifically Ericksonian hypnotherapy. I follow certain principles which you could say are Buddhist. In some cases they're universal. For example, compassion is very, very important. For me, therapy has to come from the heart. It's not an analytical process. It is when you're learning it, maybe, but once you've learned it, it has to come from the heart. The client, in that 1 hour or however long the session is the most important person in the room. So everything about my being has to be acknowledging that. And I know a lot of therapists, even experienced therapists, sometimes sit there and think, am I doing the right thing? And they kind of get in the way of the therapy by worrying about whether they're doing the right thing, what am I going to do next, and this sort of thing. And I see that as a selfish thing on behalf of therapists. It's about me, I. You know, really, I encourage my students to abandon that altogether and just focus on the client, observe and utilize whatever you observe, which is an Erikson principle. Another principle from Buddhism would be the principle of dependent origination, which you might know as cause and effect, where nothing is independent. It's always caused by something before, and that effect then becomes the cause of something else. So I very much tend to look at all problems, everything the client brings in that way, because nothing exists in isolation. And that also governs my thinking a lot in therapy. And the other thing, of course, is non-attachment. In Buddhism, suffering is caused by attachment to things, even attaching to things you like, because eventually they're not going to, you can't take them with you. You can't take the iPhone with you when you pass on. So there's inherent suffering in it, pretty much everything. But of course, in therapy, I'm thinking specifically of the suffering the client brings in. How we look at therapy, traditionally, it's about fixing a problem. But I think we should have a responsibility for not just fixing a problem, but actually helping that client have an amazing future. So once you fixed a problem, what next? So many therapists don't actually go, what's next? What are you going to do with that space where the problem used to be? How are you going to utilize, the benefits of solving the problem? Where are you going to go? And I think for me, sowing the seeds of an incredible future as a result of dealing with the problem is a very important part of therapy. And it has, in terms of hypnosis especially, it has a lot of impact. If a client is able to see beyond their problem to the point where they can get a real, authentic sense of who they can be, then the fact that they're visualizing that or experiencing it compounds the success of therapy, because they wouldn't be able to do that if therapy had failed. So it actually is like a post-hypnotic suggestion in reverse. So it's about throwing everything at the client, like Erikson used to do, whether it's indirect language patterns or metaphors or analogies or tasking. It all comes into this whole process done with love. And I think those therapists that work through love are probably already 30% the way there to being great therapists. So that's my feeling, and I just want to add to that. Otherwise, it's a waste of time for me. The reason I'm wanting to do this with you is because I want to make a difference. I'm selfish, I don't want to look back over my life and think I didn't do enough. And so I have something that works really, really well. And some of it can appear pretty miraculous, because sometimes, or very often, we have breakthroughs in a session, in one session. And that's because of the way that we're approaching it. Erikson was a genius. So if you take what he gave us and then put it in the context of using therapy as a way of bringing about a change in the mind or the brain using hypnosis, which then reduces the problem or evaporates it altogether, it doesn't exist anymore, and you do that very quickly, that's dramatic. And often clients will go, what happened? Well, my problem's gone in the session. And I'd like to demonstrate that. My goal is that everybody will leave being able to do something based on the principle of compassion, non-attachment. and dependent origination, to the point where they will be able to experience it on the course. It wouldn't surprise me if people on the course, when they do exercises, will be absolutely amazed when they have a little bit of therapy from their partner and they find their problems gone. I mean, it sounds incredible, doesn't it? But it happens. It's not unusual. And so I would be not surprised at all if people leave this course not only knowing how to do it, but having received it.